Imagine a time when whispers of royal conspiracies filled the drafty halls of castles, and the fate of a kingdom could hinge on the disappearance of a single child. Throughout the Middle Ages, countless children vanished, their stories shrouded in mystery and intrigue. This is not a tale of dragons or mythical beasts, but a darker reality where children were pawns in a game of power, kidnapped and hidden away to secure royal bloodline. We will explore the unsettling truth behind these disappearances, revealing the lengths to which nobility went to protect their lineage, the dark secrets they harbored, and the tragic destinies of the lost children of the Middle Ages. Royal conspiracies were rife during this era, and the lengths to which the nobility went to secure their lineage often involved acts of desperation and cruelty. Keep watching to uncover the hidden truths that could rewrite your understanding of medieval power and politics. Delving deeper into the heart of medieval society, we uncover an intense preoccupation with bloodlines. Royal families placed immense value on the purity and legitimacy of their lineage, viewing it as the foundation of their power and divine right to rule. This obsession was not merely a matter of pride, but a critical component of political stability and social order. A clear and untainted bloodline was believed to ensure competence, loyalty, and the continuation of the dynasty's legacy. The concept of royal blood was often intertwined with religious beliefs, suggesting that certain families were chosen by God to lead, further elevating the importance of maintaining its purity. Political and social pressures intensified this focus on bloodlines. Succession disputes were common, and any question regarding the legitimacy of an heir could plunge a kingdom into chaos. Rival families constantly sought to undermine the ruling dynasty, and doubts about the ruler's bloodline provided a potent weapon. As such, royal families were under constant pressure to demonstrate and protect the purity of their lineage, often resorting to extreme measures to secure their power. These measures included strategic marriages, elaborate genealogical records, and ruthless elimination of potential threats to ensure their line remained unchallenged. The lengths to which they would go included the horrifying act of kidnapping. Children from rival or lesser noble families were sometimes abducted to either eliminate potential future claims to the throne or to be used as political pawns, ensuring no one could challenge the established bloodline. This ruthless pursuit of securing royal bloodlines paints a stark picture of medieval power dynamics, where the lives of children were secondary to the ambitions of those in power. This obsession set the stage for many of the dark events we'll continue to uncover. As whispers echo through castle corridors, the next chapter explores the legends born from these disappearances, where folklore intertwined with the grim realities of missing children, setting a haunting backdrop to royal intrigue. As the medieval world grappled with the obsession of bloodlines, shadows lengthened, giving rise to widespread legends and folklore surrounding missing children across Europe. These were not mere bedtime stories, they were reflections of deep-seated fears and suspicions woven into the fabric of society. Tales of children vanishing without a trace became common, whispered in hushed tones around fireplaces and in town squares. These stories often morphed into cautionary narratives, warning of the dangers lurking in the shadows, both real and imagined. What set these legends apart was their recurring theme, the connection to royal intrigue. Many of these stories hinted at the involvement of noble families, suggesting that the disappearances were not random acts but calculated moves in the complex game of power. Royal families were often portrayed as both the perpetrators and the protectors in these narratives, adding layers of complexity and moral ambiguity. The lengths to which families would go to protect their power became a central motif. Legends spoke of secret arrangements, hidden identities, and elaborate schemes to either secure a lineage or eliminate a threat. The missing children were sometimes depicted as potential heirs from rival lines, spirited away to prevent future claims to the throne. In other instances, they were portrayed as innocent pawns in a larger political game, their fates sealed by the ambitions of their elders. Folklore played a crucial role in shaping public perception. Superstitions and beliefs in supernatural forces often intertwined with these stories, blurring the lines between reality and fantasy. Some believed that the children were taken by mythical creatures or evil spirits, while others whispered of dark magic and ancient curses. These elements added an aura of mystery and dread, making the legends all the more compelling. The power of these legends lay in their ability to capture the anxieties of the time. They served as a form of social commentary, expressing the fears and suspicions of ordinary people towards those in power. The stories of lost children became a way to voice dissent and question the actions of the ruling class, albeit indirectly. In many ways, these legends were a form of resistance, a way to keep alive the memory of those who had disappeared and to hold those in power accountable, at least in the realm of storytelling. These tales of missing children and royal intrigue were not just entertaining. They were a reflection of a society grappling with issues of power, morality, and the human cost of ambition. They continue to resonate today, reminding us of the dark underbelly of medieval society and the enduring power of legends to shape our understanding of the past. As we piece together the stories of lost children, it's important to understand the environment in which these events happened. Next, we'll look at the historical context of the Middle Ages, exploring the societal structures that made these kidnappings possible. Diving deeper into our historical journey, understanding the societal structures of the Middle Ages is crucial for grasping how kidnappings for royal bloodlines could occur. The medieval period, spanning roughly from the 5th to the 15th century, was characterized by a rigid social hierarchy. At the top were the nobles and royalty, who wielded immense power and influence. Beneath them were the clergy, followed by knights, and then the vast majority of the population consisting of peasants and serfs. This hierarchical structure was not just a social arrangement, it was deeply embedded in the legal and economic systems of the time. Land ownership was the primary source of wealth and power, and it was concentrated in the hands of the nobility. They controlled vast estates, extracting labor and resources from the peasants who lived and worked on their land. This created a system of dependency where the lower classes were bound to the land and obligated to serve their lords. Power dynamics in the Middle Ages were complex and often volatile. Royal families were constantly vying for control, and succession crises were common. These crises often led to internal conflicts and wars, as different factions within the nobility sought to place their own candidates on the throne. Marriage alliances, treaties, and betrayals were all part of the political landscape. In this environment, the purity and legitimacy of royal bloodlines became paramount. Royal families believed that their right to rule was divinely ordained and that their bloodline was a sacred trust. Any threat to this lineage was seen as a threat to their power and legitimacy. This obsession with bloodlines created a situation where extreme measures, including kidnapping, were considered justifiable to secure or strengthen royal claims. The role of nobility extended beyond mere governance. They were also responsible for maintaining order and dispensing justice within their domains. However, this system of justice was often arbitrary and biased, favoring the interests of the nobility. The lower classes had little recourse against the actions of their lords, and the legal system offered little protection for the vulnerable. Several factors contributed to an environment where kidnappings could occur with relative impunity. Firstly, the lack of centralized authority and effective law enforcement made it difficult to investigate and prosecute such crimes. The power of the nobility often shielded them from accountability, and even if a crime was discovered, it was unlikely to be punished if it involved a powerful family. Secondly, the social norms of the time accepted a certain level of violence and exploitation. Life in the Middle Ages was generally harsh, and the concept of children's rights was virtually non-existent. Children were often seen as property, and their fates were determined by their families and social circumstances. Lastly, the prevalence of secrecy and intrigue made it easier to conceal kidnappings. Powerful families had the resources to hire mercenaries, spies, and other agents to carry out their schemes, and they could rely on the loyalty of their servants to keep their secrets. The combination of these factors created a perfect storm, where the kidnapping of children for royal bloodlines became a dark reality of the medieval world. Having explored the historical context and societal factors that enabled these kidnappings, we now turn our attention to the specific challenges that succession crises presented to royal families, often leading to such desperate measures. Turning our attention to the heart of royal power, the frequent succession crises that plagued medieval Europe often triggered desperate measures, including the kidnapping of children to secure or strengthen royal claims. The stakes were incredibly high. A stable succession meant continued power, wealth, and influence for a royal family. An unstable succession, on the other hand, could lead to civil war, foreign intervention, and the loss of everything they held dear. As a result, royal families were constantly scheming and maneuvering to ensure their preferred candidate inherited the throne. One of the most common causes of succession crises was the lack of a clear and undisputed heir. In many cases, royal families faced challenges such as the absence of a male heir, disputed claims of legitimacy, or the existence of multiple contenders for the throne. For example, if a king died without a son, his daughter or a more distant male relative might claim the throne, leading to conflict and uncertainty. Another factor that contributed to succession crises was the complex web of marriage alliances and treaties that governed royal relations. Royal families often used marriages to forge alliances and secure their succession. However, these alliances could also create new problems if a marriage produced multiple heirs or if a treaty was broken. For instance, a royal marriage might stipulate that the offspring would inherit territory from both parents, leading to disputes over who had the stronger claim. In times of succession crises, the temptation to resort to extreme measures was often overwhelming. Kidnapping children, whether they were potential heirs or rivals, became a tool to eliminate threats, secure alliances, or manipulate the line of succession. A rival claimant might be kidnapped to remove them from the political scene, or a child from a strategic family could be abducted to force a marriage alliance. Consider the lengths to which some royal families went to ensure their dominance. In some instances, children were kidnapped and raised in secrecy, their true identities hidden to protect them from rivals or to use them as pawns in political games later in life. Other children were simply eliminated, either through outright murder or by being placed in situations where their deaths appeared accidental. These actions, while morally reprehensible, were seen as necessary by some to maintain their grip on power. The desperation surrounding succession crises highlights the ruthless nature of medieval politics and the extreme measures that royal families were willing to take to protect their bloodlines and secure their legacy. Having examined the impact of succession crises, we will now delve into the significant role the Church played during the Middle Ages. Transitioning into another sphere of influence, the Church held immense power in medieval society, deeply intertwined with royal affairs. Its influence extended into every aspect of life, from spiritual guidance to political maneuvering, making it a significant player in the events of the time. The Church's involvement with royal families was complex, often driven by a combination of religious conviction, political calculation, and economic interests. One of the primary ways the Church influenced royal affairs was through its role in legitimizing royal power. The Church's blessing was seen as essential for a ruler to maintain authority and secure the loyalty of their subjects. Coronations, for example, were religious ceremonies presided over by high-ranking church officials, symbolizing divine approval of the monarch's rule. This close relationship meant that royal families often sought the Church's support in matters of succession, marriage, and warfare. However, the church's involvement was not always benign. In some instances, the church turned a blind eye to the kidnappings of children for political gain or even facilitated such actions. This complicity stemmed from the church's own political ambitions and its desire to maintain its influence over royal families. For example, if a royal family promised land, wealth, or increased power to the church in exchange for its support, the church might be willing to overlook certain morally questionable actions. Moreover, the church's vast network of monasteries, abbeys, and other religious institutions provided a convenient cover for clandestine activities. These locations could serve as safe havens for kidnapped children, where they could be hidden away from the outside world. Church officials, bound by vows of obedience and discretion, could be trusted to keep secrets and ensure the safety of these children. The church's involvement in these kidnappings was not always direct, but its tacit approval and willingness to provide resources often made it an accomplice in these dark deeds. The motivations behind the church's actions were varied, ranging from genuine concern for the stability of the realm to blatant self-interest. Whatever the reasons, the church's involvement in the kidnappings of children for royal bloodlines remains a stain on its history, highlighting the complex and often contradictory nature of power and morality in the Middle Ages. Having shed light on the church's role, we now turn our attention to a specific instance that encapsulates the themes we've been discussing: the disappearance of the princes in the Tower. The first case study involves the disappearance of the princes in the Tower. The story of Edward V and his younger brother, Richard of Shrewsbury, Duke of York, remains one of history's most haunting mysteries. The two boys, heirs to the English throne, were placed in the Tower of London in 1483 by their uncle, Richard III, ostensibly for their protection pending Edward's coronation. However, the young princes were never seen again, fueling centuries of speculation, intrigue, and debate. The most widely accepted theory is that Richard III ordered their murder to secure his claim to the throne. By eliminating his nephews, Richard removed any legitimate challenge to his rule. Historical accounts and circumstantial evidence suggest that the deed was carried out by hired assassins within the Tower, though no concrete proof has ever been found. Some historians point to the political climate of the time, marked by ruthless power struggles and dynastic ambitions, as a compelling motive for Richard's actions. However, alternative theories persist. One suggests that the princes were spirited away to safety, either by loyalists who opposed Richard III or by foreign powers seeking to destabilize the English monarchy. According to this theory, the boys may have lived out their lives in secret, far from the intrigues of court. Another theory proposes that the Duke of Buckingham, a close ally of Richard III who later turned against him, may have been responsible for the prince's disappearance as part of a larger plot to seize the throne for himself. Regardless of the truth, the disappearance of the princes in the Tower had profound implications for royal bloodline disputes. It cast a long shadow over Richard III's reign, undermining his legitimacy and fueling rebellions. The mystery also served as a potent symbol of the lengths to which individuals would go to secure power, highlighting the vulnerability of children in the ruthless game of royal succession. As we delve into another enigmatic chapter, we shift our focus to the curious case of the Lost Heir of Burgundy. As we navigate through the annals of unsolved mysteries, another tale of intrigue unfolds, that of the Lost Heir of Burgundy. In the rich and powerful Duchy of Burgundy, a similar drama played out, one shrouded in mystery and suspicion. This case centers around a young Burgundian heir who vanished under circumstances that suggest foul play, potentially a kidnapping orchestrated to eliminate a rival claimant to the throne. The Duchy of Burgundy during the medieval period was a significant political power, rivaling even the Kingdom of France in wealth and influence. Succession was a high-stakes affair, with numerous noble families vying for control. In this environment, the disappearance of a direct heir could dramatically alter the balance of power, opening the door for competing claims. The young heir, whose name has been lost to the shadows of history, was last seen in the company of trusted advisors and family members. Accounts from the time suggest a sudden departure, explained away as a secret journey for education or diplomacy. However, whispers soon turned to murmurs of a more sinister plot, with fingers pointing towards rival factions within the Burgundian court. One theory suggests that a neighboring power eager to weaken Burgundy orchestrated the kidnapping to destabilize the duchy. By removing the rightful heir, they could sow discord and potentially install a more favorable ruler. Another theory posits that a disgruntled relative within the Burgundian dynasty, driven by ambition and resentment, arranged for the heir's abduction. The lack of a body or any conclusive evidence has kept this case open to speculation for centuries. What is known is that the heir's disappearance led to a succession crisis, with multiple claimants vying for the Burgundian throne. This internal conflict weakened the duchy, making it vulnerable to external pressures and ultimately contributing to its decline. Similar to the princes in the Tower, the case of the Lost Heir of Burgundy underscores the ruthless nature of medieval power politics. Children, especially those of royal or noble blood, were often pawns in a larger game, their lives and futures sacrificed for the ambitions of others. And now, to further comprehend the scope of these historical enigmas, we will be journeying to the Kingdom of Aragon, delving into accounts of stolen children and conspiracies. Turning our attention to the Iberian Peninsula, we uncover yet another layer of complexity in our grim subject: the story of children from the Kingdom of Aragon who were allegedly kidnapped to secure alliances or eliminate threats to the throne. Aragon, a powerful medieval kingdom, was no stranger to political intrigue and dynastic maneuvering. Here, the abduction of children took on a particularly sinister form, often intertwined with the strategic alliances and power plays that defined the era. Unlike the other cases we've examined, the kidnappings in Aragon appear less about eliminating direct heirs and more about manipulating alliances through forced marriages or coerced agreements. Children were taken not necessarily to remove them from the line of succession, but to use them as bargaining chips in negotiations between rival families or kingdoms. Historical accounts suggest that noble families within Aragon sometimes engaged in the practice of seizing children from other prominent houses to force a marriage that would consolidate land or power. These unions, far from being based on love or consent, were calculated moves designed to strengthen one family's position at the expense of another. The kidnapped child, often a young girl, would be forced into marriage, effectively becoming a hostage to ensure her family's compliance with the alliance. Moreover, there are whispers of Aragonese children being abducted to serve as political pawns on a larger scale. In some instances, it is believed that royal offspring were targeted by rival kingdoms seeking to destabilize Aragon or extract concessions from its rulers. The threat of harm to these children could be used to influence royal decisions or force Aragon into unfavorable treaties. The historical records pertaining to these events are, unsurprisingly, scarce and often obscured by conflicting accounts. However, the recurring theme of children disappearing amidst political tensions points to a disturbing pattern of exploitation and manipulation. The lack of justice for these children further underscores the impunity with which the nobility operated during the medieval period. As with the princes in the Tower and the Lost Heir of Burgundy, the Stolen Children of Aragon serve as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of the young in an era defined by ruthless ambition and unchecked power. These cases, though separated by geography and specific circumstances, share a common thread: the willingness of those in power to sacrifice innocent lives for political gain. Now, shifting focus to the roles of those who may have been complicit, we'll examine the often overlooked role of wet nurses and servants in these dark schemes. Now, let's consider a more intimate aspect of these abductions: the often overlooked role of wet nurses, servants, and other household staff. These individuals, integral to the daily lives of noble families, were sometimes complicit in these kidnappings, either through direct involvement or by turning a blind eye. Wet nurses entrusted with the care of infants held a unique position of influence and access. Their close proximity to the children of noble families made them potential pawns in kidnapping plots. A wet nurse, either coerced or willingly, could easily spirit away a child under the cover of her duties, often with little suspicion. The bond between a wet nurse and the child she nursed could also be exploited. A loyal wet nurse might be convinced to protect a child from perceived threats, even if it meant participating in a kidnapping. Similarly, servants and other household staff, privy to the inner workings of noble residences, possessed valuable information and opportunities. They knew the routines of the family, the layout of the estate, and the security measures in place. This knowledge could be exploited by those seeking to kidnap a child. Servants might be bribed or threatened into providing access to the child, or they might be directly involved in the abduction itself. Their motivations could range from financial gain to loyalty to a rival faction or family. It's also worth noting that certain servants may have genuinely believed that they were acting in the best interests of the child or their master, perhaps swayed by false information or twisted loyalties. The involvement of wet nurses and servants in these kidnappings highlights the insidious nature of these crimes. It demonstrates how those closest to the victims could be manipulated or coerced into betraying their trust, blurring the lines between victim and perpetrator. These individuals, often marginalized and vulnerable themselves, were caught in a web of power and deceit, forced to make impossible choices with devastating consequences. The records of these events are understandably scarce, with the complicity of household staff often shrouded in secrecy. However, piecing together fragmented accounts and analyzing the social dynamics of the time, we can begin to understand the role these individuals played in the dark history of child kidnappings within royal bloodlines. The next part will delve into how medieval espionage and kidnapping networks operated, often under the orders of powerful nobles. Turning now to the infrastructure that enabled these crimes, medieval espionage and kidnapping networks were shadowy organizations, often operating in the gray areas of the law, that carried out these abductions, frequently under the direct orders of powerful nobles. These networks were composed of spies, mercenaries, and other clandestine figures who specialized in gathering intelligence, executing covert operations, and ensuring the safe transport of kidnapped children. The structure of these networks varied depending on the scale and complexity of the operation. Some were small, ad hoc groups assembled for a specific purpose, while others were larger, more established organizations with extensive reach and resources. At the top of these networks were often powerful nobles or members of the royal family who commissioned the kidnappings. These individuals used their wealth, influence, and connections to recruit and manage the operatives involved, providing them with the necessary resources and protection. Spies played a crucial role in these networks, gathering information about potential targets, identifying vulnerabilities in their security, and monitoring their movements. They infiltrated noble households, gathered gossip from the servants, and kept a close watch on the children who were deemed valuable. Their intelligence was essential for planning and executing successful kidnappings, ensuring that the operation was carried out with minimal risk and maximum efficiency. Mercenaries, on the other hand, were the muscle of these networks, responsible for carrying out the actual kidnappings. These were often hardened warriors or skilled assassins who were willing to do whatever it took to complete their mission. They were hired for their strength, skill, and ruthlessness, and were often well compensated for their services. Mercenaries might be employed to overpower guards, break into castles, or transport kidnapped children across long distances, facing any dangers or obstacles that stood in their way. The effectiveness of these networks relied on secrecy and discretion. Operatives were often sworn to silence, and the identities of those involved were closely guarded. The networks operated in the shadows, using coded messages, secret meeting places, and trusted intermediaries to communicate and coordinate their activities. Any breach of security could have dire consequences, not only for the operatives themselves but also for the nobles who were behind the kidnappings. These networks were not limited by national borders or political allegiances. They operated across Europe, forging alliances with individuals and organizations who could assist them in their endeavors. They might enlist the help of smugglers, bandits, or corrupt officials to transport kidnapped children across borders, hide them in safe houses, or erase their identities. The complexity and reach of these networks underscore the scale and sophistication of the child kidnappings that occurred during the Middle Ages. The consequences for those caught participating in these networks were severe, ranging from imprisonment and torture to execution. However, the risks were often outweighed by the potential rewards, both for the operatives themselves and for the nobles who stood to gain from the kidnappings. The allure of power, wealth, and influence drove these individuals to participate in these dark and dangerous activities, perpetuating a cycle of violence and exploitation that scarred the lives of countless children and families. With these espionage and kidnapping networks in place, the psychological impact on the families who lost children to these schemes could be devastating. The psychological impact on families who lost children to these schemes was unsurprisingly devastating, leaving emotional scars that could last a lifetime. For parents, the abduction of a child was a profound trauma, shattering their sense of security, trust, and hope. The grief was often compounded by uncertainty, as families were left to wonder about the fate of their missing children, never knowing whether they were alive or dead, safe or suffering. This ambiguity could prolong their agony, preventing them from finding closure or moving forward with their lives. Mothers, in particular, often faced immense social stigma and blame, being accused of negligence or incompetence in protecting their children. Such accusations, whether justified or not, added to their distress, leaving them ostracized and isolated from their communities. The absence of a child could also strain marital relationships as couples struggled to cope with their shared grief and guilt. Some marriages crumbled under the pressure, leaving families even more vulnerable and fragmented. But the emotional toll wasn't limited to parents alone. Siblings also suffered from the loss of a brother or sister, experiencing feelings of sadness, anger, and confusion. They might have blamed themselves for not being able to protect their sibling, or felt guilty for surviving when their brother or sister did not. The absence of a sibling could also disrupt family dynamics, altering the roles and responsibilities of those who remained. In some cases, the grief of these families was exploited for political gain by rival nobles or factions seeking to undermine their enemies. They might spread rumors or false information about the circumstances of the kidnapping, further inflaming tensions and sowing discord. They might also offer false hope or empty promises of assistance, only to exploit the family's vulnerability for their own purposes. Such manipulation added insult to injury, deepening the family's despair and eroding their faith in the fairness of the system. Moreover, the trauma of child abduction could have long-lasting effects on the mental and emotional well-being of surviving family members. They might develop symptoms of anxiety, depression, or post-traumatic stress disorder, struggling to cope with the memories and emotions associated with their loss. These symptoms could interfere with their ability to function normally, affecting their work, relationships, and overall quality of life. So with the families reeling from such a profound loss, we'll next consider how marriage alliances sometimes hinged on these kidnappings. Turning our attention to another facet of medieval power dynamics, we find that marriage alliances were a cornerstone of royal strategy, serving as a means to consolidate power, secure territories, and forge diplomatic bonds between kingdoms. These alliances were carefully orchestrated, often involving years of negotiation and intricate planning, with the ultimate goal of strengthening royal bloodlines and ensuring the stability of the realm. In this intricate game of thrones, kidnapped children sometimes became pawns, forced into marriages to serve the political ambitions of powerful nobles and monarchs. These arranged unions, devoid of love or consent, reduced the children to mere instruments in the pursuit of power, their personal desires and well-being sacrificed for the greater good of the dynasty. Such unions could legitimize a ruler's claim to the throne, unite warring factions, or prevent future conflicts by creating familial ties between rival houses. Forced marriages could also serve as a means of controlling conquered territories or assimilating rival bloodlines into the ruling family. By marrying a kidnapped heir or heiress to a member of their own family, a monarch could effectively neutralize any potential threats to their authority, while also gaining access to valuable resources or strategic advantages. The consequences of these forced marriages were often devastating for the children involved, who were thrust into unfamiliar environments, separated from their families and subjected to the whims of their new spouses and in-laws. They might have faced isolation, abuse, or even death, their lives reduced to nothing more than political bargaining chips. Moreover, the children born from these unions carried the weight of their parents' forced alliance, their identities and loyalties forever shaped by the circumstances of their conception. Despite the potential benefits of marriage alliances, they were not without their risks. A poorly chosen spouse could bring scandal, corruption, or even treachery to the royal court, undermining the stability of the realm. A childless marriage could also threaten the succession, leading to disputes and power struggles among potential heirs. As always, royal marriages were fraught with political intrigue, and a misstep could have dire consequences. Given the complex legal and social environment, medieval laws and justice systems often shaped the landscape in which these events unfolded. So let's understand how that affected the fate of kidnapped children. Taking a step further into the shadows of medieval society, let's consider medieval laws and justice and how they often failed to protect the vulnerable. The legal systems of the Middle Ages were complex and varied, often reflecting the interests of the ruling elite rather than providing equal justice for all. While formal laws existed, their application was frequently inconsistent, particularly when dealing with crimes involving the nobility. When it came to the kidnapping of children, especially those of noble birth, the legal response was often muted or non-existent, reflecting the prevailing power dynamics of the time. In many cases, the kidnapping of children was simply not recognized as a crime, particularly if it served a political purpose. Royal families were often seen as being above the law, and their actions were justified by the need to protect the dynasty or secure the succession. Even if a kidnapping was acknowledged, the victims and their families often had little recourse. The legal system was heavily biased in favor of the nobility, who had the resources and influence to manipulate the courts and avoid punishment. The concept of children's rights was largely non-existent in the Middle Ages, and children were often viewed as property of their parents or guardians. As such, their abduction was not considered a violation of their individual rights, but rather an offense against their families. This made it difficult to prosecute kidnappers, especially if they were acting on behalf of a powerful noble or monarch. Even when legal proceedings were initiated, they were often drawn out and inconclusive. Evidence was difficult to obtain, witnesses were often reluctant to come forward for fear of reprisal, and juries were often swayed by the influence of the accused. The Church, which played a significant role in medieval society, sometimes intervened in these cases, but its involvement was often motivated by political considerations rather than a genuine concern for justice. The absence of effective legal remedies for child kidnapping created a climate of impunity, emboldening those who sought to exploit vulnerable children for their own gain. It also reinforced the perception that the nobility was above the law, further entrenching the power imbalances of medieval society. This lack of legal protection left families with little recourse but to seek justice through alternative means, such as private vengeance or appeals to higher authorities, often with limited success. As we continue to unravel the mysteries of the lost children, we begin to see how folklore and superstition played an important role in explaining the unexplainable. Exploring the role of folklore and superstition, medieval narratives surrounding lost children were deeply intertwined with supernatural beliefs and curses. In an era where scientific understanding was limited, people often turned to folklore and superstition to explain the inexplicable, and the disappearance of a child was no exception. These beliefs provided a framework for understanding and coping with the trauma of a missing child, often attributing the loss to malevolent supernatural forces. One common theme in medieval folklore was the belief in fairies or other mythical creatures abducting children. These creatures were often depicted as mischievous or malevolent beings who lured children away with promises of magical realms or enchanted treasures. Stories of changelings, where a fairy would replace a human child with one of their own, were widespread, reflecting the anxieties of parents who feared their child had been stolen and replaced by an imposter. Curses were another common explanation for the disappearance of children. People believed that a curse cast by a witch or an angry spirit could cause a child to vanish without a trace. These curses were often seen as a form of divine retribution for some transgression committed by the child's family, adding a layer of guilt and fear to the tragedy. The belief in curses was so strong that families would often go to great lengths to appease the supernatural forces they believed were responsible for their child's disappearance, seeking the help of priests, healers, or other spiritual figures. Superstitions also played a significant role in shaping the narratives surrounding lost children. Certain places, such as dark forests, abandoned ruins, or crossroads, were believed to be haunted by evil spirits or inhabited by dangerous creatures. Children who strayed into these areas were thought to be at risk of being captured or harmed by supernatural forces. Parents often warned their children about the dangers of these places, instilling in them a fear of the unknown and a belief in the power of the supernatural. These folk beliefs and superstitions not only provided explanations for the disappearance of children, but also shaped the way people responded to these tragedies. Families might perform rituals to ward off evil spirits, seek the guidance of fortune tellers or diviners, or even accuse suspected witches of being responsible for the abduction. These actions reflect the deep-seated belief in the power of the supernatural and the desire to regain control over events that seemed beyond human understanding. As we delve deeper into the layers of history, we unearth modern archaeological discoveries that shed light on these enduring mysteries. The modern archaeological discoveries offer a tangible link to the past, sometimes confirming or challenging historical assumptions about missing children. Unidentified child remains unearthed from medieval burial sites have ignited intense interest and speculation. While it's challenging to definitively link these remains to specific cases of royal kidnapping, advanced forensic techniques such as DNA analysis and isotope analysis offer tantalizing clues. DNA can sometimes establish family connections, potentially linking the remains to known royal lineages. Isotope analysis, which examines the chemical composition of bones and teeth, can reveal information about a person's diet and place of origin, potentially indicating whether a child was raised in a royal household or came from a different social background. Artifacts discovered near child remains can also provide valuable context. Items like clothing fragments, jewelry, or toys can offer insights into a child's social status and lifestyle. For example, the discovery of a finely crafted silver locket near the remains of a child buried in a monastery might suggest a connection to a noble family who placed the child there for safekeeping or education. Similarly, the presence of royal insignias or heraldic symbols on artifacts found in children's graves could indicate a direct link to royal bloodlines. However, interpreting these archaeological findings requires careful consideration. the absence of evidence is not necessarily evidence of absence, and the lack of definitive proof of royal kidnapping does not mean it never occurred. Many factors can obscure or erase evidence over time, including decomposition, disturbance of burial sites, and the loss or destruction of artifacts. Moreover, the interpretation of archaeological finds is often subjective and open to debate. Historians and archaeologists may disagree about the significance of certain artifacts or the meaning of burial practices, leading to conflicting theories about the fate of missing children. Despite these challenges, modern archaeological discoveries offer a valuable window into the lives of children in the Middle Ages and the mysteries surrounding their disappearances. As scientific techniques continue to advance and new archaeological sites are excavated, further evidence may emerge that sheds light on these dark chapters of history. With the Earth still guarding its secrets, we turn to the records of the time, exploring historical documents and the missing pieces of evidence that could clarify these mysteries. As we sift through the dust of ages, the journey through historical records reveals a landscape fraught with challenges. Historians often grapple with incomplete or deliberately altered documents when trying to reconstruct the narratives of kidnapped children in royal bloodlines. The scarcity of reliable evidence and the presence of misinformation significantly compound the difficulty of uncovering the truth behind these medieval mysteries. One of the primary obstacles is the selective preservation of records. Royal archives, monastic chronicles, and legal documents are typically the main sources of information, but these records often cater to the interests of those in power. Sensitive information about royal scandals, including kidnappings, might have been intentionally omitted, destroyed, or falsified to protect the reputation of the ruling family or maintain political stability. This means historians must navigate a minefield of potential biases and gaps in the historical record. Moreover, the manipulation of records was not uncommon in the Middle Ages. Royal genealogies could be altered to legitimize a ruler's claim to the throne, and stories about missing children might be suppressed or rewritten to eliminate any suggestion of foul play. Powerful individuals might have even commissioned the creation of false documents to support their version of events or discredit their rivals. This makes it exceedingly difficult for historians to distinguish between fact and fiction and to determine the true fate of the lost children. The challenge is further complicated by the passage of time. Over centuries, many records have been lost, damaged, or destroyed due to natural disasters, wars, and neglect. What remains may be fragmented, incomplete, or difficult to interpret. For example, a crucial piece of evidence might be mentioned in a letter or a legal document, but the context surrounding that reference may be missing, leaving historians to speculate about its true meaning. The difficulty of piecing together these historical puzzles only adds to the enduring mystery of the lost children of the Middle Ages. As historians continue to delve into the archives, they must remain vigilant and critical, carefully weighing the available evidence and considering alternative interpretations. The truth may be elusive, but the pursuit of knowledge and understanding remains a vital endeavor. Despite the challenges, theories of survival and escape emerge, suggesting the resilience of these lost children. Transitioning from the shadows of manipulated records, theories of survival and escape emerge, suggesting the resilience of these lost children. One prevailing theory suggests that some kidnapped children were secretly hidden away, either by sympathetic individuals or by those who later had a change of heart. These children might have been placed in remote monasteries, far-flung villages, or even sent to live with trusted families in other countries under assumed identities. The aim would have been to protect them from the dangerous political machinations that had led to their abduction. Another theory posits that some children managed to escape their captors, either through their own ingenuity or with the help of others. In the chaos of the medieval world, opportunities for flight may have arisen during times of war, political upheaval, or simple lapses in security. These escapees might have sought refuge with commoners, religious institutions, or even rival noble families who were willing to offer them protection in exchange for information or political leverage. Regardless of how they survived or escaped, the stories of these children were often deliberately erased or rewritten to suit the agendas of those in power. Royal genealogies might be altered to remove any trace of their existence, and historical accounts might be fabricated to discredit their claims to the throne or diminish their importance. In some cases, rumors and legends about their fate might be spread to confuse or mislead the public, making it more difficult to uncover the truth. For example, a kidnapped prince might have been rumored to have died in captivity, even though he was secretly living under a false name in a distant land. Or a stolen heiress might have been portrayed as illegitimate or mentally unstable to prevent her from challenging the ruling dynasty. These acts of historical revisionism served to solidify the power of those in control and to ensure that the lost children remained lost both physically and historically. As a result, the true fate of these children remains shrouded in mystery, with only tantalizing hints and fragments of evidence to suggest their survival and escape. The challenge for historians is to sift through the layers of deception and misinformation to piece together the real stories of these remarkable individuals who defied the odds and managed to reclaim their lives, even if their true identities were forever obscured. Exploring such narratives also brings us to consider the role of art and literature in depicting the period's shadowy truths. The role of art and literature in medieval society cannot be overstated, serving as both a mirror reflecting societal anxieties and a lens through which those anxieties were distorted or romanticized. Child kidnapping, a dark undercurrent of the medieval world, found its way into the art and literature of the time, albeit often veiled or presented in ways that obscured the full horror of the practice. In many artistic depictions, the theme of lost or stolen children was often intertwined with religious or moral narratives. For example, paintings and tapestries might depict scenes of the massacre of the innocents from the Bible, evoking a sense of tragedy and loss while subtly alluding to the real-world disappearances of children. These depictions served as a reminder of the ever-present threat to vulnerable members of society, while also reinforcing religious teachings about good and evil. Literature, too, played a significant role in shaping perceptions of child kidnapping. Fairy tales and folklore often featured stories of children abducted by malevolent creatures or wicked individuals, reflecting the fears and superstitions of the time. These stories, while fantastical, tapped into the real anxieties of parents and communities who lived with the constant threat of child abduction. However, art and literature also had a tendency to romanticize or sanitize the reality of child kidnapping. In some chivalric romances, for example, the abduction of a noble child might be portrayed as a daring adventure, with the child eventually being rescued by a heroic knight. These stories often glossed over the trauma and suffering experienced by the child, focusing instead on the bravery and chivalry of the rescuer. Similarly, some medieval ballads and songs romanticized the idea of children being taken away to a better life, perhaps by fairies or other supernatural beings. These narratives offered a comforting fantasy for parents who had lost children, suggesting that their loved ones were not truly gone but had simply been transported to a more idyllic realm. Moreover, artistic and literary depictions of child kidnapping were often influenced by the political and social agendas of the time. Royal families, for example, might commission works of art that portrayed missing heirs or abducted children in a way that served their own interests. A painting might depict a kidnapped prince as a martyr or a symbol of national unity, while a poem might glorify the king's efforts to find and rescue the child, regardless of the actual truth. Thus, medieval art and literature offer a complex and multifaceted view of child kidnapping, reflecting both the real fears and the idealized fantasies of the time. While these works can provide valuable insights into the social and cultural context of the period, it is important to recognize their limitations and biases. They often obscure the true horrors of child abduction, sanitizing the experience for the sake of entertainment or political expediency. Therefore, to more fully appreciate the topic, it would be beneficial to compare them to modern cases of kidnappings. Drawing a stark contrast yet undeniable connection, let us bridge the gap between the medieval era and our modern world by examining kidnappings. While centuries apart, these acts share disturbing similarities, revealing how power and politics persist as driving factors. Today, we often see cases of child abduction linked to custody battles, human trafficking, or even terrorism. These scenarios, like their medieval counterparts, frequently involve individuals or groups seeking to exert control, gain leverage, or achieve specific political or financial goals. The desperation and ruthlessness displayed in modern kidnappings mirror the extreme measures taken by medieval nobility to secure their bloodlines and maintain their power. Consider, for example, cases of politically motivated kidnappings in conflict zones. Just as medieval rulers might abduct children to eliminate rivals or strengthen alliances, modern-day factions might kidnap children to destabilize governments or gain bargaining chips in negotiations. The psychological impact on the families involved remains a constant, with both medieval and modern victims suffering immense trauma and long-lasting emotional scars. Moreover, the exploitation of vulnerable individuals for political gain is a recurring theme. In the Middle Ages, wet nurses and servants were sometimes complicit in child kidnappings, either through coercion or loyalty to their masters. Similarly, today, marginalized communities and impoverished families are often targeted by human traffickers and criminal organizations who exploit their desperation for financial or political purposes. Another parallel can be drawn in the way societies respond to these crimes. While medieval laws often failed to address kidnappings involving nobility, modern legal systems also face challenges in prosecuting powerful individuals and organizations involved in child abduction. Political influence and corruption can hinder investigations, allowing perpetrators to escape justice and perpetuate the cycle of violence. The parallels between medieval and modern-day kidnappings serve as a sobering reminder of humanity's darker tendencies. The pursuit of power, the exploitation of the vulnerable, and the manipulation of justice continue to fuel these heinous crimes across centuries. Grasping it, we will move forward to address the far-reaching consequences these acts had on royal history. Transitioning our focus now, let's explore the enduring impact of these abductions on the chapters of royal history. The kidnappings we have discussed were not isolated incidents but rather deeply impactful events that influenced royal successions, wars, and alliances. The absence of a legitimate heir due to kidnapping could throw an entire kingdom into turmoil, sparking succession crises that often led to civil wars or foreign invasions. In some cases, the abduction of a child meant the extinction of a royal line, opening the door for rival families to seize power. This could redraw the political map, leading to new alliances and reshaping long-standing enmities. For instance, if a kidnapped prince was the key to maintaining a fragile peace treaty, his disappearance could trigger renewed hostilities and undo years of diplomatic efforts. Moreover, the uncertainty surrounding the fate of these lost children often fueled conspiracy theories and political intrigue. Rumors about their survival or hidden whereabouts could be weaponized by opposing factions, creating instability and undermining the ruling monarch's authority. Royal courts became hotbeds of suspicion and paranoia as courtiers schemed and plotted to exploit the situation for their own gain. Kidnappings could also play a pivotal role in marriage alliances, serving as either a catalyst or a consequence. A kingdom might seek to strengthen its position by marrying off a kidnapped heir to a foreign power, effectively legitimizing their claim to the throne. Conversely, the abduction of a royal child could be used as a tool to disrupt existing alliances, weakening rival kingdoms and isolating them on the international stage. The long-term effects of these kidnappings extended far beyond the immediate political landscape. They shaped the cultural memory of the affected regions, leaving a legacy of fear, mistrust, and unresolved mysteries. The stories of lost children became ingrained in folklore and legends, serving as cautionary tales about the dangers of ambition, betrayal, and the ruthless pursuit of power. As we continue to peel back the layers of this complex history, we will turn our attention to debunking some of the myths that have grown up around these stories, separating fact from fiction to reveal the underlying truths. Turning our attention to separating fact from fiction, it's time to address the common myths and misconceptions that cloud the true stories of the lost children of the Middle Ages. Over time, many legends have grown around these disappearances, often obscuring the historical reality with romanticized or sensationalized tales. One prevalent myth is the idea that all kidnapped children were destined for lives of luxury within royal courts, perhaps raised as secret heirs or pampered favorites. While this may have been the case for a select few, the reality for most was far more grim. Many were exploited as political pawns, used as leverage in negotiations, or even eliminated to prevent future claims to the throne. Another misconception suggests that these kidnappings were always meticulously planned and flawlessly executed operations. In truth, many were likely opportunistic acts carried out by individuals or small groups seeking personal gain, rather than grand conspiracies orchestrated by powerful nobles. The chaos and instability of the medieval period provided ample opportunities for such crimes, and the lack of effective law enforcement made it difficult to track down the perpetrators. Furthermore, there's a tendency to portray these lost children as innocent victims with no agency of their own. While they undoubtedly suffered greatly, it's important to remember that some may have actively resisted their captors, formed alliances with other prisoners, or even managed to escape. Their stories are not simply tales of passive victimization, but also potentially of resilience and survival against overwhelming odds. Many accounts also exaggerate the role of supernatural forces in these kidnappings, attributing them to curses, demonic pacts, or other mystical phenomena. While superstition was certainly widespread in the Middle Ages, it's crucial to approach these claims with skepticism and to seek rational explanations based on historical evidence. Attributing kidnapping solely to the supernatural obscures the very real human motivations and political machinations that were at play. Separating fact from fiction requires a critical examination of the available evidence, distinguishing between verifiable historical records and embellished folklore. It means questioning the motives of those who propagated these stories, recognizing the biases inherent in medieval sources, and acknowledging the gaps in our knowledge. Only by doing so can we hope to gain a more accurate understanding of the lost children of the Middle Ages and the dark realities they faced. Having clarified fact from fiction, we now face the ethical dilemmas of how historians approach and interpret these complex and sensitive events from the past. Exploring these dark chapters of history brings us face to face with the ethical dilemmas that historians grapple with when uncovering the lost children of the Middle Ages. How do we balance the pursuit of truth with the need to be sensitive to the victims and their families? It's a question that weighs heavily on those who seek to understand these events. One primary challenge is the potential for re-traumatization. Exposing historical injustices can reopen old wounds, stirring up emotions and causing pain for those who may still be affected by the legacies of these events. Historians must consider the impact their work may have on descendant communities and strive to present their findings in a way that minimizes harm. Another dilemma involves the interpretation of incomplete or biased sources. Medieval records are often fragmented, contradictory, or influenced by the agendas of those in power. Historians must carefully evaluate the reliability of these sources and acknowledge the limitations of their knowledge. Presenting tentative conclusions as definitive truths can be misleading and perpetuate historical inaccuracies. Furthermore, there's the risk of sensationalizing these stories for entertainment purposes. The darker aspects of history can be alluring, but it's essential to avoid exploiting the suffering of others for gain. Historians must resist the temptation to sensationalize or romanticize these events and instead focus on providing an accurate and nuanced account. Balancing the desire to uncover the truth with the need to treat these stories with sensitivity requires careful consideration and a commitment to ethical research practices. It means approaching these topics with empathy, humility, and a deep respect for the lives of those who were affected. It also means being transparent about the limitations of our knowledge and acknowledging the potential for harm. Moreover, is the question of presentism, how historical events are interpreted through the lens of modern values and beliefs. While it's essential to condemn past wrongs, it's also important to avoid imposing contemporary moral standards on historical actors. Understanding the context in which these events occurred is crucial for a fair and accurate interpretation. By engaging with these ethical dilemmas, historians can ensure that their work not only sheds light on the past, but also contributes to a more just and compassionate understanding of the human experience. Approaching history that is sensitive helps to ensure that these stories are handled responsibly and respectfully. As we reflect on these ethical considerations, we can see lessons from the past on power, morality, and the lengths people will go to protect their legacy. Exploring what these tales teach us, we are reminded of the enduring lessons regarding power, morality, and the extreme actions people undertake to safeguard their legacies. These historical accounts from the Middle Ages reveal much about the human condition, especially our susceptibility to corruption when power is unchecked. From the chronicles of missing royal heirs to the legends of stolen children, we witness a recurring theme. Those in positions of authority often manipulate and exploit others. The pursuit of power, as depicted in these events, frequently overshadows ethical considerations, leading to decisions that inflict profound suffering on innocent lives. Moreover, is the understanding of the choices made by individuals during these times. The historical record is full of examples of people who compromised their values in exchange for power or security, revealing significant insight into the nature of human morality. The lengths to which individuals were willing to go, betraying loyalties and violating moral codes to protect their lineage or kingdom, underscore the intense pressures and motivations that shaped their actions. These examples challenge us to consider how we might behave under similar circumstances and confront the darker aspects of human nature. Contemplating how legacies are shaped and protected, it becomes clear that the creation of a lasting heritage often involved difficult and sometimes brutal choices. Royal families, in their quest to secure their lines and maintain their status, engaged in practices that would be considered abhorrent by today's standards. Kidnapping, forced marriages, and even murder were tools employed to eliminate threats and consolidate power. These actions cast a shadow over their legacies, raising questions about the true cost of ambition and the moral compromises inherent in the pursuit of historical renown. These stories from the Middle Ages serve as a stark reminder of the ethical complexities inherent in the exercise of power and the lengths to which people will go to protect their legacy. With these lessons in mind, we will now turn to debunk some common myths and misconceptions surrounding these stories, separating fact from fiction and explaining how legends often overshadow the truth. Drawing closer to the end of our journey, let's recap the main elements we've uncovered, emphasizing the lasting enigma of the lost children of the Middle Ages. Throughout our discussion, we have explored the hidden corners of medieval history, where the disappearances of children are intertwined with royal bloodlines, power struggles, and the relentless pursuit of legacy. We examine the political motivations, societal structures, and individual actions that could lead to such dark deeds, leaving us to ponder the profound questions these events raise about human nature and morality. Reflecting on these historical narratives, it becomes evident that the stories of missing children are not just isolated incidents, but rather symptoms of a larger systemic issue. The obsession with maintaining pure bloodlines, securing succession, and eliminating threats created an environment where children became pawns in a high-stakes game of power. The desperation of royal families, combined with the silence or complicity of those around them, allowed these kidnappings to occur and remain shrouded in mystery. These cases reveal a world where the lives of the innocent were often sacrificed for the ambitions of the powerful, leaving a legacy of unresolved questions and lingering unease. Moreover, we have seen how these historical events have resonated through the ages, shaping folklore, influencing art, and prompting continued investigation. The enduring mystery of the lost children serves as a reminder of the complexities of the past and the challenges historians face in piecing together the truth. Despite the gaps in the historical record and the manipulation of evidence, the stories of these children continue to capture our imagination, prompting us to consider the ethical implications of power and the importance of remembering those who have been forgotten. As we conclude this exploration, consider this: how might a greater understanding of these historical events influence contemporary approaches to justice and ethics? The mysteries surrounding the lost children of the Middle Ages encourage us to reflect on our values and the systems we create to protect the most vulnerable members of society. Now, we invite you to share your thoughts and perspectives in the comments below. What aspects of these stories resonated with you the most? Do you have theories or insights to contribute? Let's continue the conversation and delve deeper into these historical mysteries together. If you found this video informative and thought-provoking, please like, share, and subscribe for more content exploring the hidden corners of history. Hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest uploads, and join us as we continue to unravel history's most intriguing enigmas.